Rain slashed across the narrow streets of Brussels, the wind carrying the cold bite of winter and the faint metallic scent of distant gunfire. Street lamps flickered through the fog, casting long, wavering shadows over the cobblestones, while the occasional rumble of military trucks echoed from the riverbank. Amidst the shivering quiet of the city, a small, seemingly insignificant object lay on the wet pavement, a gold pocket watch, its face cracked and hands frozen at 3:17. To anyone else, it was a forgotten trinket, lost in the chaos of occupied Europe. But to the right eyes, it was a key, a clue that could expose an entire spy route feeding vital intelligence to German forces. In a cramped apartment overlooking the square, Henri, a baker in his late 30s, paused mid-activity. The scent of rising dough and the warmth of his ovens contrasted sharply with the chill seeping through the walls. Through his window, he noticed a German officer pause near the watch, glancing around as if he had lost more than a mere timepiece. Henri's curiosity piqued. He understood instinctively that this object was not just lost. It was a signal, a breadcrumb in a larger game of espionage unfolding across the city. Brussels in 1943 was a city under tension. Soldiers in gray uniforms patrolled with rigid precision, their polished boots clicking against wet stones. Spies, couriers, and informants moved in shadowed corners, exchanging messages disguised as ordinary letters, parcels, or even mundane objects. Intelligence operations thrived in this gray world of secrecy, and every overlooked detail could carry life or death consequences. Henri's eyes lingered on the watch, its delicate hands reflecting the dim glow of a nearby lamp. Somewhere, someone had dropped it deliberately or carelessly, and its presence in the street was about to unravel secrets that had remained hidden for months. As the wind howled, Henri made a decision. What might seem like an ordinary object, lost, forgotten, or abandoned, could be the key to understanding the movements of enemy agents, the timing of their rendezvous, and the network that supplied them with critical information. One simple action, a careful observation, had the potential to shift the balance of covert operations. In that instant, the life of a quiet baker intersected with the deadly games of spies and the fate of intelligence operations in occupied Europe. Henri bent down to pick up the pocket watch, his fingers brushing the cold metal. Little did he know that this small, accidental discovery would set in motion a chain of events that would expose a spy network, endanger lives, and highlight the extraordinary impact of ordinary civilians in wartime espionage. Why was the pocket watch lying in the street, and more importantly, who had lost it or placed it there deliberately? These questions haunted Henri as he turned the small object over in his hands. The watch was finely made, its surface engraved with initials that suggested ownership by someone with means, not an ordinary soldier or pedestrian. Yet its presence in the rain-soaked street, in the heart of occupied Brussels, hinted at a story far more complex than a simple accident. Henri sensed immediately that he was holding a piece of a much larger puzzle. Over the previous months, Henri had noticed subtle irregularities in the city. Couriers delivered letters and packages at unusual hours, often lingering only a moment before disappearing into side streets. He had glimpsed figures in civilian attire exchanging glances or brief objects, their movements careful and deliberate. At first, these incidents seemed isolated, trivial, even incidental. But now, in the palm of his hand, the pocket watch transformed from a simple artifact into a potential clue, a signpost in a network of espionage operating quietly beneath the surface of everyday life. The dilemma was clear. Brussels was crawling with spies, informants, and German patrols, all operating under the assumption that ordinary civilians would remain oblivious. One misstep could compromise lives, destroy resistance operations, or alert enemy forces to an impending discovery. Henri, an ordinary baker with no formal intelligence training, now faced a high-stakes decision: ignore the watch and continue with his quiet life, or investigate further, potentially exposing himself to danger while unraveling the secrets hidden in its presence. He began to analyze the watch carefully. The engravings were unusual, suggesting code or personal identifiers. The hands, stopped at 3:17, might mark a time of importance. There were faint scratches on the case that could correspond to repeated handling or intentional markings. Could it have been used as a signal? Was it dropped accidentally or placed intentionally to be found by someone observant enough to notice? Henri realized he was standing at the crossroads of ordinary life and extraordinary espionage, where the smallest object could carry intelligence capable of influencing military operations. Questions multiplied. Who was the owner? What information did the watch hold, intentionally or by accident? How long had it been part of the spy network, and how many agents had interacted with it? Henri understood that this was not a simple matter of lost property. The watch was part of a communication chain, a breadcrumb left in a city under occupation, carrying the potential to expose an entire spy route if interpreted correctly. The mystery of the lost pocket watch encapsulated the dangers and intricacies of wartime espionage. Subtle signals, hidden messages, and civilian intervention intersecting to protect lives and uncover enemy operations. Henri's challenge was to decipher its meaning, anticipate the next steps of the unseen network, and act without alerting anyone who might be watching. In that moment, a single object, the gold pocket watch, became the key to understanding a web of secrets, the first clue in a chain of events that would test courage, observation, and intelligence under the shadow of war. Brussels in 1943 was a city of contrasts, ornate architecture and bustling markets juxtaposed against the harsh realities of occupation. German soldiers patrolled with rigid precision, their gray coats and polished boots striking a steady rhythm against the cobblestones. Posters declaring loyalty to the Reich covered walls, while shutters were drawn tight against the wind and fear. Yet amid this tension, life continued. Street vendors hawked vegetables and bread, children darted through alleys, and ordinary citizens carried on routines that concealed quiet acts of resilience and survival. Henri, a baker in his late 30s, lived on a narrow street lined with modest row houses and small shops. His bakery, a warm and fragrant refuge, was filled daily with the comforting smells of rising dough, freshly baked bread, and the faint tang of yeast. The shop was modest, with wooden counters worn smooth by years of use, and shelves stocked with simple loaves, pastries, and occasional treats for children. Customers came and went, unaware that their daily errands passed through the eyes of someone quietly attuned to the subtleties of the world around him. Henri's life before the war had been simple and steady. He had inherited the bakery from his father, learning the craft of kneading, shaping, and baking bread with skill and precision. In ordinary times, his days were marked by routine, preparing dough before dawn, tending the ovens, greeting neighbors, and keeping his shop running efficiently. But the war had transformed Brussels into a city of uncertainty. Occupation forces, informants, and spies had turned ordinary streets into arenas of clandestine observation. Henri had learned to notice what others overlooked: the hesitation in a passerby's step, the furtive glance across the street, the subtle changes in delivery patterns. Though he was not trained in espionage, Henri's profession had inadvertently equipped him with tools vital for observation and deduction. Bakers see patterns in flour, timing in yeast, and precision in measurements. Henri extended this attention to detail to the rhythms of his city. He noted when a stranger lingered too long near the shop, when a package arrived at unusual hours, or when messages seemed disguised as ordinary objects. These observations, mundane in appearance, became threads he could follow to uncover hidden activity. When the gold pocket watch appeared in the street, Henri's ordinary existence intersected with extraordinary circumstances. An object that would have been discarded by most became a clue, a key to understanding movements, drop points, and signals in a secret network operating beneath the surface of daily life. The seemingly simple rhythms of his bakery, the warmth of ovens, and the smell of bread now coexisted with the vigilance of a civilian who had unwittingly stepped into the shadowy world of espionage. In this city of watchful eyes and hidden messages, Henri would learn that ordinary professions could mask extraordinary heroism. A baker's observation, patience, and attention to minute details would become pivotal in intercepting enemy operations, proving that courage and intelligence often arise in the most unexpected places. The first hints that something unusual was happening came subtly, almost imperceptibly. Henri noticed it in the patterns of the streets around his bakery. Certain strangers, dressed in civilian clothing but moving with a purposeful precision, appeared at irregular intervals. They paused at corners, glanced up at windows, or exchanged small packages with seemingly ordinary citizens. At first, Henri dismissed it as the nervous behavior of people living under occupation, yet the appearance of the gold pocket watch forced him to reconsider. Something was deliberately being communicated, and he might have stumbled upon it. The watch itself became a point of intrigue. Its fine craftsmanship and carefully engraved initials suggested it belonged to someone with influence, not an ordinary soldier or passerby. Yet it had been left carelessly, or so it seemed, on the rain-soaked cobblestones. Henri realized that in the world of spies, the ordinary often concealed the extraordinary. Objects left in plain sight could serve as signals, drop points, or markers, unnoticed by the untrained eye, but immediately recognizable to those in the know. Observing the streets from his shop window, Henri began to notice patterns. Couriers arrived at precise times, lingering only long enough to leave small parcels or exchange coded gestures. A man in a worn coat appeared repeatedly near the corner opposite the bakery, stopping briefly, shifting his briefcase, and checking his surroundings before moving on. Another figure, a woman carrying a basket, seemed to be signaling with subtle nods. Every interaction seemed ordinary, yet Henri's growing understanding suggested a larger network operating under the city's calm surface. Odd deliveries to his bakery also caught his attention. Small packages arrived addressed to neighbors or forgotten residents, left in crates or behind doors. Henri noted that some packages bore symbols, dots, slashes, or scratches that appeared insignificant but matched the style of the pocket watch engraving. These clues hinted at coded communication. Someone was transmitting information in a way designed to avoid detection by German authorities. The tension in the city was palpable. German patrols had increased, moving with silent authority through narrow streets and alleys. Officers occasionally peered into shops, questioning patrons and noting faces. Every decision Henri made had to be measured. One careless word, one unnecessary glance at a suspicious courier, or one misplaced action could compromise not only him but also the wider network he was beginning to uncover. By the end of the week, Henri had mapped a preliminary sequence of events. The watch, the couriers, the subtle signals, all formed a pattern. He understood that he was witnessing the movements of an organized spy route, and the stakes could not have been higher. In a city where the ordinary concealed extraordinary dangers, Henri realized he could no longer remain a passive observer. Every step, every glance, and every deduction would count if he hoped to intercept a spy network operating in plain sight. The mundane rhythms of daily life were now intertwined with a covert world of espionage, and Henri had taken his first steps into a game where vigilance could mean the difference between survival and disaster. Henry knew that observation alone would not be enough to unravel the mystery of the lost pocket watch. He began a methodical investigation, combining his knowledge of the streets with careful analysis of the object itself. Every scratch on the watch, every imperfection in its engraving seemed to hold meaning. Some marks appeared accidental, the result of wear, but others were deliberate. Tiny symbols etched with precision, almost invisible to a casual observer. Henri realized that the watch was more than a lost timepiece. It was a signal, a coded element in a network of espionage that had operated silently through Brussels. He started by cross-referencing the watch with the patterns he had observed in the streets. Couriers appeared at precise times, always carrying small packages or stopping to exchange glances with accomplices. Henri noted every detail, the intervals between appearances, the positioning of packages, even the way shadows fell along the pavement. It became clear that the watch had been left intentionally, acting as a marker for the next stage of a spy route. The hands frozen at 3:17 were no coincidence. They indicated a rendezvous time, a clue for anyone trained to read such signals. Henri also discovered subtle clues in the packaging of deliveries. Wrappers, crates, and bundles that seemed ordinary were actually coded messages. Small scratches, punctures, or folds corresponded to locations he had seen couriers frequent. By carefully documenting these anomalies in a small notebook, Henri began to reconstruct the spy network, plotting safe houses, drop points, and courier routes with surprising clarity. The watch had been the first breadcrumb, but the streets themselves were filled with more markers, waiting for someone attentive enough to notice. To confirm his suspicions, Henri enlisted the help of a trusted friend from the resistance, sharing observations and tentative conclusions through coded messages. Together, they pieced together the connections between the couriers, the packages, and the unusual behaviors. Each discovery validated Henri's growing understanding. The network was extensive, operating under the assumption that ordinary citizens would remain oblivious. Yet with careful analysis, he could anticipate the next moves of the agents, predicting drop points and rendezvous times with remarkable accuracy. The investigation revealed the intelligence value of seemingly mundane objects. One misplaced pocket watch, initially overlooked by soldiers and passers-by, had unlocked an entire operational map. Henri's success was rooted in patience, observation, and meticulous attention to detail, the very skills honed through years of baking and managing a busy shop. Every loaf of bread he had measured, every minute he had tracked for dough rising, now translated into the precision needed to track enemy movements. By the end of his investigation, Henri held a clear understanding of the spy network's structure. He knew the couriers, the drop points, and the potential targets of the intelligence. The lost pocket watch had exposed a web of secrets that German intelligence had assumed was invisible. In the quiet of his bakery, Henri prepared to take the next step. One calculated move that could intercept the network, protect lives, and prevent sensitive information from reaching enemy hands. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and a single baker's vigilance was about to make history. The danger intensified almost immediately. Henri understood that the moment he acted, the network might sense interference. German intelligence was relentless, and a single misstep could unravel his careful investigation. Every sound in the streets now carried weight. The rhythmic tapping of boots, the distant rumble of trucks, the murmured conversation of passers-by. Shadows lengthened under the dim glow of lamps, and every pedestrian could be an enemy agent, a courier, or an informant. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the smallest disturbance to ripple outward. One morning, as Henri prepared his bakery before dawn, he noticed an unfamiliar figure loitering near the corner across the street. The man's coat was nondescript, his movements casual, But Henry's experience told him otherwise. The stranger's gaze lingered on the bakery's windows, scanning, calculating. Henry ducked behind the counter, heart pounding, and observed him through a crack in the shutters. The man's actions mirrored those of the couriers he had been tracking, yet something in the stiffness of his posture suggested suspicion. Perhaps he was aware that someone was watching. Every delivery Henri monitored became a potential trap. Packages that had seemed innocuous might conceal more than information. They could serve as bait, designed to expose anyone investigating the network. He realized the spies were adaptive, capable of detecting irregularities, and extremely dangerous when cornered. One false move could lead to arrest, imprisonment, or worse, not only for him, but for his neighbors and resistance contacts. Even his bakery, once a place of warmth and routine, now felt like a stage for a high-stakes game, where every object, gesture, and glance could carry fatal consequences. The tension escalated when a German officer appeared at a nearby shop, questioning locals about unusual deliveries and sightings of strangers. Henri's stomach tightened. Casual observation had shifted into immediate risk. His notes, carefully hidden in the drawers beneath the counter, might be discovered at any moment. Even the smallest oversight, a misplaced package, a scrap of paper, an extra moment of scrutiny, could alert the enemy to his activities. To counter the danger, Henri adopted extreme caution. He staggered his movements, varied his observation points, and used subtle distractions, arranging trays of bread, adjusting sacks of flour to conceal his attention. He communicated with the resistance in coded messages, carefully planning an interception without alerting the network. Each decision required precision, timing, and restraint. The threat became almost tangible as Henri realized the network could be watching his reactions, testing for vulnerabilities. Every delivery, every exchange, and even the streets themselves were layered with hidden intent. Henri's survival and the success of the interception depended on his ability to remain invisible, blend into the ordinary rhythms of the city, and act decisively at the right moment. In this world of hidden danger, one lost pocket watch had become the key to exposing spies, and one misstep could cost him everything. The culmination of Henri's careful observations came on a gray, misty morning. The streets of Brussels were emptying as early commuters hurried past shutters and lamplit sidewalks. The air was damp, carrying the faint smell of coal smoke and wet stone, blending with the ever-present tension that the city held under occupation. Henri positioned himself at a vantage point inside his bakery, eyes fixed on the corner where he had seen Couriers and the mysterious stranger appear repeatedly. Today, everything seemed poised to reveal itself. At precisely the time indicated by the frozen hands of the lost pocket watch, 3:17, a figure approached the designated rendezvous point. Henri recognized him immediately, the man who had lingered suspiciously near his bakery, carrying the signature briefcase, moving with the careful, precise gait of someone trained in covert operations. He stopped briefly at a crate, glanced around, and retrieved a small package. The moment was fleeting, calculated, yet to Henri it was almost cinematic. Every movement a deliberate signal in a network of secrecy. Using the patterns he had meticulously documented, Henri signaled the resistance with a discreet message. Hidden operatives had positioned themselves nearby, ready to intercept without alarming the German authorities. Henri held his breath as the agent, unaware that his movements had been decoded, proceeded along his route, placing packages and exchanging coded glances. Every step mirrored the intricate web Henri had reconstructed from the WWII, scratches, engravings, and symbols of the lost pocket watch. When the agent reached the final drop point, resistance operatives moved with quiet precision. The man was intercepted before he could relay critical intelligence, papers, and packages were seized in the shadows. Henri's stomach tightened with a mix of fear and relief. One wrong observation, one moment of hesitation, and the network might have continued undisturbed. The watch, which had seemed a trivial object at first glance, had unlocked an entire spy route, exposing the hidden choreography of a dangerous intelligence operation. The significance was immediate and profound. By intercepting the double agent, Henri prevented sensitive information from reaching German command. Resistance safehouses were protected, and the flow of critical intelligence into enemy hands was disrupted. In the quiet of his bakery, Henri understood that a simple act of vigilance, picking up a lost pocket watch and noticing patterns, had altered the trajectory of covert operations across Brussels. It was not a dramatic battle fought with guns and explosives, but a quieter, cerebral confrontation where observation, deduction, and courage determined the outcome. Henri, a humble baker with no formal training in espionage, had transformed a mundane object into a strategic key. The lost pocket watch had revealed an entire spy network, underscoring the extraordinary power of civilian intervention during wartime. In that moment, Henri realized that ordinary life, careful observation, and courageous action could converge to expose secrets, protect lives, and alter the course of history, all in the shadow of occupied streets and whispered intelligence. The capture of the double agent, orchestrated by the meticulous observation of a simple baker and a lost pocket watch, rippled far beyond the streets of Brussels. While the broader history of World War II often focuses on massive battles, strategic bombings, and the movements of armies, this incident underscores the vital role ordinary civilians played in intelligence operations. Henri's vigilance prevented critical information from reaching German command, disrupted enemy operations, and protected resistance networks across the city. In a war driven as much by secrets as by weaponry, such interventions could be decisive. Historians recognize that the occupation relied on fear, deception, and secrecy. German intelligence networks depended on the assumption that civilians would remain passive observers. Henri's actions challenged that assumption. By noticing patterns in courier movements, decoding subtle cues in packages, and recognizing the significance of the pocket watch, he exposed an operational map that the enemy believed was invisible. This disruption not only safeguarded ongoing resistance operations, but also demonstrated how ordinary citizens, armed with keen observation and courage, could influence the course of intelligence warfare. The episode highlights the symbiotic relationship between civilian observation and organized intelligence work. Allied intelligence and resistance operatives often relied on local insights to identify safe houses, intercept couriers, or track the flow of information. Henri's discovery exemplifies this dynamic. A seemingly trivial object, overlooked by soldiers and enemy agents, became a linchpin in uncovering a complex network. His civilian perspective, untrained yet precise, provided actionable intelligence that trained spies and officers might have missed. Moreover, the incident illustrates the psychological dimension of wartime espionage. German agents assumed their network was secure. Their meticulous methods relied on secrecy, deception, and the invisibility of ordinary citizens. Henri's intervention disrupted that belief. One small act of attentiveness, the scrutiny of a lost pocket watch, and the patterns surrounding it had cascading consequences, protecting civilians, safeguarding operations, and preventing potentially catastrophic leaks. The story serves as a reminder that courage and intelligence are not always measured by rank or resources, but by the capacity to notice, interpret, and act decisively under pressure. In the broader tapestry of World War II, Henri's actions contributed to the survival and efficacy of resistance networks within occupied Europe. The intelligence intercepted from the agent confirmed that German networks were vulnerable, that civilian participation was crucial, and that even the smallest intervention could have strategic implications. This episode remains a testament to the extraordinary impact that ordinary people can have in shaping events, demonstrating that heroism often arises in subtle, quiet acts rather than on battlefields or in war rooms. Ultimately, the lost pocket watch became more than a forgotten object. It became a symbol of civilian courage, observation, and agency in a war defined by secrets. Henri's decisive action illustrates how one attentive individual could disrupt enemy operations, safeguard lives, and alter the trajectory of intelligence efforts during one of history's darkest chapters. After the double agent was intercepted, Brussels returned to its uneasy rhythm. Soldiers continued to patrol the streets, their boots striking cobblestones in an unchanging cadence. Shops reopened each morning, children played cautiously in alleyways, and the city's hum of survival persisted. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, lives had been quietly protected. Henri returned to his bakery, the comforting smells of fresh bread and yeast a stark contrast to the tension of the preceding weeks. To the outside world, he remained a simple baker, unaware that his careful observations had altered the course of espionage in the city. For Henri, the days that followed were marked by a complex mixture of relief, pride, and vigilance. He continued to monitor the streets, not out of suspicion but as a habit, formed through necessity. The pocket watch, once a lost object, now rested in his drawer, a silent reminder of how a small, seemingly ordinary artifact could unlock the operations of a sophisticated spy network. Henri understood that ordinary people, acting with observation and courage, could influence the course of events in ways that armies and intelligence agencies alone could not. The resistance acknowledged his role quietly. Reports circulated among trusted operatives, praising the vigilance and insight of civilians capable of discerning patterns invisible to trained soldiers. Henri's actions became an example of how ordinary citizens, through patience, careful attention, and courage, could protect lives and prevent the enemy from executing critical plans. His experience underscored a truth that historians often highlight. In the shadowed world of occupation, heroism was not always explosive or public. Sometimes it was the subtle, precise act of noticing, interpreting, and acting. Over the years, Henri's story contributed to the broader understanding of civilian intelligence work during World War II. Analysts studying occupied Belgium and the wider European theater emphasized the importance of local observation, the interception of communications, and the disruption of enemy networks by civilians. The lost pocket watch became emblematic of how the most minor of details, a scratch, a frozen hand, a misplaced object, could expose entire spy routes and save countless lives. It highlighted the intersection of ordinary life and extraordinary courage. Today, Henri's bakery has long since closed, and the streets of Brussels bustle with ordinary life. Yet the story of the lost pocket watch endures in historical accounts, resistance memoirs, and studies of wartime intelligence. It reminds us that courage and resourcefulness are not limited to battlefields or secret offices. They can emerge in quiet moments through observation, patience, and careful action. A single civilian noticing a small anomaly can thwart enemy operations, safeguard networks, and change the course of events. Henri's legacy lies not in grand gestures, but in the power of attentive action, demonstrating that ordinary people, when confronted with extraordinary circumstances, can become the hidden heroes of history. In the end, the lost pocket watch symbolizes vigilance, courage, and the profound impact of one person paying attention. Through Henri's quiet heroism, lives were protected, a spy network dismantled, and a city's subtle acts of resistance preserved in history. It is a reminder that even in the darkest times, ordinary individuals can wield extraordinary influence, and that the smallest details, when recognized and acted upon, can change the trajectory of history.